Right now, your skull is holding a brain that is physically smaller than the one your ancestors carried 20,000 years ago. Not a little smaller, about the size of a tennis ball smaller. This is not an exaggeration. Every single human being alive today is walking around with less brain than the people who painted on cave walls by torchlight. Think about that for a second. We've built rockets, we mapped the human genome, we're having a conversation with a screen right now, and somehow we're doing all of it with a smaller brain than a person who never once used a wheel. Anthropologists have measured this in skulls from every continent on Earth: Africa, Europe, Asia, different climates, different diets, different populations who never once made contact with each other, all showing the exact same trend. But here's the part that should really bother you. Scientists have spent decades studying this, and they still can't agree on why it happened. Some think we got dumber, some think the opposite, and the real answer might explain something uncomfortable about how your own brain works today. Here's a number that puts this in perspective. A 150 cubic centimeter loss doesn't sound like much until you realize that's roughly equivalent to losing an entire lobe's worth of neural tissue. Millions upon millions of neurons simply gone from the average human skull. And yet, by almost every measure we have, humans today solve more complex problems than our ancestors ever did. Anthropologist John Hawks at the University of Wisconsin has tracked this shrinkage across thousands of skulls. His numbers are specific. Around 20,000 years ago, the average human brain measured roughly 1,500 cubic centimeters. Today, that number sits closer to 1,350. That's a loss of about 150 cubic centimeters, roughly the size of a tennis ball, scooped straight out of your skull. This is not an exaggeration, and it's not slow either. On an evolutionary timescale, 20,000 years is nothing, a blink, which means whatever caused this happened fast, and it happened to almost everyone. Paleoanthropologist Christopher Stringer at the Natural History Museum in London has one explanation. He points out that human bodies also got smaller over roughly the same period, so a smaller body simply needs a smaller brain to run it, the same way a smaller car doesn't need as big an engine. Think about this. If that were the whole story, this would just be a footnote, a biological rounding error. But it isn't the whole story. Because brain size didn't shrink evenly, it shrank fastest exactly when something else in human life was changing dramatically. Around 15 to 10,000 years ago, something was happening that had never happened before in the entire history of our species. Humans were no longer living in small, scattered groups. They were packing together: villages, farms, early cities. Cognitive scientist David Geary studied this exact window. He found that as population density went up, brain size went down. Not loosely correlated, consistently across multiple regions. This is not an exaggeration. Geary's data shows roughly a 3 to 4% drop in relative brain size during the exact period humans started living in denser groups. His explanation is called the social brain trade-off. The idea is simple and a little unsettling. When you're alone or in a tiny group, your brain has to store everything, every skill, every solution, every piece of survival knowledge. But once you're living inside a larger group, you don't have to remember everything yourself anymore. Someone else in the tribe knows how to track. Someone else knows how to heal a wound. Someone else remembers where the water is during a drought. The answer changes everything. Your brain didn't need to carry the whole load anymore. The group became the memory, and a brain that outsources its thinking doesn't need to be as large to survive. Not every scientist agrees with this timeline, by the way. Researchers at UNLV, led by Brian Vilmore, have pushed back hard on parts of this theory, arguing the data is messier than it looks, and some proposed shrinkage windows don't hold up under closer analysis. The debate is very much alive, but the broader 20,000-year trend, the tennis ball-sized loss, is not seriously disputed. What's disputed is why. There's a third theory worth knowing because it's the strangest one. Some researchers connect this shrinkage to something called self-domestication. The idea borrows from what happens when wild animals are domesticated over generations. Domesticated foxes, dogs, even domesticated cattle tend to develop smaller brains than their wild ancestors. Calmer temperaments, less aggression, smaller brains. Some scientists believe humans did something similar to ourselves. As we built more cooperative societies, the most aggressive, hardest to live with individuals were less likely to survive and reproduce. Generation after generation, we may have been selecting for calmer, easier to cooperate with humans. And calmer may have come with smaller. This is not an exaggeration. Three completely different explanations from three separate research teams, and none of them agree on which one is the real answer. Here's what this actually means for you. You do this exact same thing every single day without noticing. You don't memorize phone numbers anymore. Your phone remembers them. You don't memorize directions. Your map app remembers them. You don't have to remember most facts at all. You just know you can look it up in 4 seconds. This is not an exaggeration. Psychologists actually have a name for this. It's called the Google effect. And studies have found people remember information far less when they know it's easily searchable later. Your brain isn't being lazy, it's doing exactly what it did 15,000 years ago, offloading the weight onto something outside itself because it can. Psychologist Betsy Sparrow, who led the original Google effect research, found something even stranger. People weren't just forgetting facts they could look up, they were remembering where to find the information instead of the information itself. Your brain isn't storing the fact anymore, it's storing the location of the fact. Exactly like knowing which person in your ancient tribe knew how to track without needing to know how to track yourself. Think about this. Your ancestors offloaded memory onto the tribe around them. You offload memory onto a device in your pocket. Different tool, same exact strategy. So the size of your brain isn't shrinking because you're getting weaker. It's shrinking, if it's shrinking at all, because your species figured out something powerful. You don't have to carry everything alone. So why were ancient human brains so much larger? The honest answer is scientists still don't fully agree. Some point to smaller bodies needing less brain to run them. Some point to the rise of groups and brains that no longer had to work alone. Some researchers even question how much shrinkage really happened at all. But one thing is not up for debate. You are not using less brain because you're broken. You're using it differently, the same way your ancestors did the moment they realized they didn't have to remember everything by themselves. Every time you reach for your phone instead of your memory, you're not failing. You're running 15,000 years of the exact same strategy. Trust the group. Trust the tool. Save the space in your head for something else. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are just ancient. If this changed how you think about your own brain, hit like before you scroll away. Subscribe if your brain hasn't updated in 300,000 years either. And tell me in the comments, what's one thing you never remember anymore because your phone remembers it for you?